Good evening or good afternoon. This is potentially a worldwide audience, so good morning as well may be appropriate. And welcome to our celebration of World Migratory Bird Day 2022. I'm John Rudin. I'm the Senior Director for Bird-Friendly Communities at the National Audubon Society.
I'm Connie Sanchez. I'm the Bird-Friendly Buildings Coordinator for Audubon.
Thanks, Connie. So I think we can go to the next slide probably. There may still be need. We will be returning to that instructions again if people need it. But I just wanted to welcome you. Audubon is a proud sponsor of World Migratory Bird Day 2022. And this year's theme is Dim the Lights for Birds at Night, which is focused on light pollution, its negative impacts on migratory birds, and also how we are working towards solutions that can help birds navigate our skies more safely. So before we dive into our lineup, we want to note that we are offering the live interpretation during this webinar, and you can see the instructions in the chat box. You need to really choose your language, English or Spanish. And I understand that there's some traffic going on there, so please do that. I do also want to thank, we have a cross Audubon team that really helped pull together all the World Migratory Bird Day resources and materials that we are sharing both tonight, but also on our website. So I want to thank all of them, particularly Nicole Bush, who was our project team lead, and our IT and social media teams who are helping to run the show tonight. And I also, of course, want to thank the Spanish translation team. So thank you. Connie, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Great, thanks, John. So we've got a great program lined up for you all this evening or this afternoon, wherever you are. We're going to kick things off. John and I will talk a little bit about light, artificial light at night, and its impacts on birds, on migratory birds in particular. And then we'll hear from Nat Seavey of our Migratory Bird Initiative team at Audubon. And then from Tomas Altamirano in Chile. And then for the next portion, we'll hear from a panel of chapter leaders as well as staff from across our Audubon network, diving deeper into our local efforts across our network. So we'll have a discussion with them and hear more about their work on the ground. And just a reminder, here are the instructions to choose your language for those just joining us. And we've dropped that in the chat as well. I'm going to throw things back to John now.
Okay. Thanks, Connie, and again, welcome everybody. As I've mentioned, Connie and I sit in the Bird-Friendly Communities team at the National Audubon Society here in the United States. We have actually a hemispheric audience tonight, and again, perhaps a worldwide audience. So I did just want to introduce briefly what it is we do on the Bird-Friendly Communities team at Audubon. We really are seeking to meet birds' needs in the places that we share with them, so right in our communities, and in particular thinking about providing these things that they need, right, to live their lives, their full life cycles: food, shelter, safe passage, and places to raise their young. If we can meet those needs in our communities, we are making them better for birds, and I think also making them better for people too. Birds bring joy into our communities, but also for providing green space, clean air, clean water, all of those things that birds need. We're actually really making these places better for people as well. Tonight, we're going to be focusing really on that safe passage aspect of these things that we're providing for birds. So that's the focus of tonight's webinar and what I'm going to be sharing with you right now. So when we think about birds and particularly safe passage, we have thrown up a lot of obstacles with the human-built environment. And when we think about that on the Bird-Friendly Communities team, we really kind of parse it out into two areas: artificial light at night, and also glass and the problems that it provides, both from the perspective of reflection and also transparency. And we really do understand that there's a complex interaction between these as birds are navigating through the day and the nighttime, but also what is actually a direct mortality risk for birds is that glass that they may run into. I'm not going to talk a lot about that. We have a lot of resources. We focus a lot on that, but really the focus of this is that artificial light at night in keeping with the theme of World Migratory Bird Day. Okay, the next slide. And so why is light pollution an issue for birds or artificial light at night? And this is an image I pulled from the World Migratory Bird Day website, which again has this theme. And you can see behind those birds, this is an image, and there's lots of images that are available that kind of illustrate this point of how much light is broadcast to the sky at night. And this gives that overall impression. And it's interesting to think about, this is a phenomenon that really only started about 150 years ago, right? When we had the ability through the use of electricity to broadcast light into the night sky, but it's grown massively since then, and it continues to grow. And why does this matter to birds? So the next slide shows, if we look at birds, the entirety of birds across the globe, there's some, wiggle room around this number, and depends, of course, when we're talking about migration. Are we talking about seasonal migration, altitudinal migration? This is not a webinar on migration per se, so I'm not going to get into that. But our understanding is that some proportion of about 20% of birds are migratory. And this, if you think about the birds that live in tropical areas that don't have to actually do a lot of movement around looking for resources, that would probably explain that. If we look at, the next slide will show, if you think about birds that are found in North America during some portion of the year, about 70% of those are considered migratory, and that comes from our Migratory Bird Initiative team. And then if you drill down a little bit more into that, if you look at those birds, about 80% of those birds actually migrate at night. And there seems to be a number of reasons for this, although this is an active area of research. So you can imagine that migratory flight is energetically expensive. It actually takes a lot of energy to fly massive distances. So if you're flying during the periods of the day when it's cooler, that might help keep you from overheating. Interestingly, in the 20% that don't migrate at night, many of those are raptors that take advantage of thermals during the day to help them on their migratory journey. So if you actually want to avoid flying at the same time as birds that might predate you, doing it at night actually physically and temporarily separates you from them. But there's an additional resource that's important, and that is for navigation. The star map and moon can act as navigational aids for birds. And again, during evolutionary history, there's been no artificial light at night. And so it was a really good cue to actually cue in on, because it was consistent. It's not the only way that birds navigate, of course, but it is something that is important to them. And all of that artificial light that we are pumping into the sky can obscure that star map and the moon, and can actually make it more difficult for them to make that navigational journey during migration. So that's really what the impact is of artificial light at night. And that's a very brief and high level description, but I just wanted to share that to set the grounding for all of us as we're talking about how are we actually moving towards solutions and understanding this. So with that very high level framing, I'm just going to pass it back to Connie to talk a little bit more about what we're doing across the hemisphere.
Great, thanks, John. So as John mentioned, we've got a lot of great work happening across the network focused on reducing light pollution as well as collisions related to that. And here's what our network looks like just in the US alone. We've got over 40 cities involved in Lights Out programs, as well as several statewide and regional programs. And once again, this is just a representation of what we've got in the United States. And there is really some fabulous work happening across the hemisphere as well as internationally on this front, including the Fatal Light Awareness Program in Toronto, as well as what you'll be hearing about later from Tomas in Chile. So we'll be taking a deeper dive into some of these local efforts as we talk with our panelists in a little while, but you can explore this network online at audubon.org. And across the network, our staff, as well as chapters and partners, are employing a variety of strategies to reduce light pollution and collisions, from building awareness of the problem through print and digital media, working with local partners, creating demonstration sites which showcase collision prevention solutions, as well as focusing on municipal engagement, working with local decision makers. So a lot of strategies that are being employed on this front. And so not a one size fits all, but really, and you'll be hearing once again from our panelists in just a little bit about what they've been doing on the ground and hear about those local successes as well as challenges. And throughout all of this work, of course, partnerships and collaborations are so critical. It's important that our work on the ground is informed by the science, both working with our internal teams as well as our external partners to ensure that we better understand the science of bird migration, the places on which these birds depend throughout their life cycle, right? As well as the hazards that these birds are facing. So we're working with partners like the International Dark Sky Association with a lot of expertise in light, and with our networks working together, kind of working towards reducing light pollution for both birds as well as people. We're working with the Urban Bird Treaty Network, a lot of alignment there in terms of reducing hazards in these urban areas for these birds throughout their life cycle, not just migratory birds. The Environment for the Americas, of course, and it's really critical that we work with our decision makers on the ground as we think about policies to protect these birds. I'm going to hand things back to John. Just kidding.
Great, thank you, Connie. And so with that framing of both the a high-level framing of the issue and also of Audubon's approach, again, as Connie mentioned, we'll be diving deeply into how Audubon approaches that across the country. But I did want to actually first introduce our first speaker, who is Nat Seavey, the Director of Migration Science for National Audubon Society's Migratory Bird Initiative. So Matt is going to be doing a brief presentation. We will have time for questions after Nat's presentation. So what you can do is go ahead and put those questions in the chat. If you're following us on Facebook, you can put them in the chat. We will be answering a couple questions before we move on to the next presentation. So go ahead and do that. And with that, take it away, Nat.
Fantastic. Thanks, John and Connie. It's wonderful to be here. I'm going to start by sharing my screen. Okay. Welcome, everybody. It's great to be here celebrating World Migratory Bird Day and telling you a little bit about the Migratory Bird Initiative. So the science tells us that the time to act is now. So in the recent publication that identified the loss of 3 billion birds, one of the strong messages out of that was that there's been a huge loss in migratory birds. So more than 2.5 billion migratory birds have been lost since 1970. And there's been a 28% decline in populations of migratory bird species during this time. And looking forward, we recognize that the impacts of climate change will make this situation even more challenging. And so the time to act is now, and the time to think about what it means to provide all of those things that John mentioned that migratory birds need, especially safe passage during this critical time of the year. So with that, Audubon's developed a migratory bird initiative. And our vision is that we can secure the future of migratory birds in the Western Hemisphere by identifying the places they need to thrive across the Americas, taking actions to protect the places that matter most, reducing threats, and engaging people from communities of diverse backgrounds in the joy of birds and the wonder of migration. So stepping back and thinking about what do birds need across the hemisphere and how do we link all of those places together in a way that makes a difference. So the work that we're engaged with right now, we're starting by consolidating and standardizing as much of the spatial data we can on migratory birds. There's been such an incredible amount of migration science that's gone on in the past few decades as more technology has become available to track birds and understand the challenges that they face. And we're taking that and we're putting it into a Bird Migration Explorer, which will be an online resource that helps people explore bird migration. We're developing migration science applications that can help guide conservation that Audubon does and work that we can do with our partners. And we can think about how we can engage people in the science of bird migration, whether that's at our centers or other educational locations. So with that background tonight, what I wanted to talk about was 3 resources that we've put together to help put light pollution into a hemispheric context. So I'll start by talking a little bit about some animated migration maps for 2 species. And these give us a sense of how birds move across the hemisphere during migration. And then I'll show you an interactive map of light pollution that allows you to explore where light pollution is across the hemisphere. And finally, some connections maps for 10 of the lights out cities where Audubon is working and thinking about how birds connect those lights out cities across the hemisphere. So first of all, the species migration maps. So this is an example. This one is for Swainson's thrushes. So Swainson's thrushes are a migratory bird. In this case, we're showing data that was collected in California. You can see those birds right now, and then they're migrating. And I'll talk a little bit about why the dots change color there in a bit. And then we see that they winter across Central and South America. So these particular data are they're recorded with what are called light level geolocators. So these for these small birds like thrushes and many warblers, we can't put a device on that broadcasts a signal back to us. We have to put on something that records some sort of information that helps us understand where they were. And then we have to recapture that bird at the end of the year and then download that data. In this case, it's recording light levels throughout the entire day. And we can take that information on light levels and we can figure out sunrise and sunset time. And then just like sailors would do in terms of understanding their latitude and longitude, we can reconstruct the locations of those birds throughout the year. So that does have a lot of error. That's why these locations bounce around so much. It's not that the birds are moving that much, but there's some error there that we just can't reduce. And then also during the equinox period, in the spring and the fall, when daylight is the same across the entire, it's the same, day length is the same throughout the globe, we lose our ability to estimate the locations. And that's why the circles turn black during that period where we lose the locations. So that's for Swainson's thrushes. And here's one for blackpoll warblers. So blackpoll warblers start that one. Blackpoll warblers winter in northern South America, and then they migrate up through the Caribbean and Florida up to their breeding grounds. We can see that these birds were tagged on those breeding grounds. They come back, we lose them during that fall equinox period. And then we see them back on their northern South America wintering grounds. So really exciting example of how technology right now is allowing us to track birds in ways that we never have been before. And we can start to learn about where they are. This is just one example. There's all sorts of different technologies. There's GPS technology that's being developed that allows us to get very accurate positions. We can, because of battery life, we can only get a few positions. So you don't get a nice long data set like this, but just really exciting time for the science of migration. So the next thing that I want to show you is an interactive map of light pollution. And this shows us the footprint of artificial light at night across the hemisphere to give us a sense of where birds might encounter light when they're migrating. So I'll switch across. This is the actual web application here, and there's going to be a link in the chat to this so you can go explore it on your own. You can zoom in and zoom out, and you can pan around to look at different parts of the hemisphere. But just thinking about looking at those blackpoll warblers that are moving up and down the eastern seaboard, right, and thinking that across many of those areas they're encountering a lot of light at night, and that's a significant challenge for those birds even as they come down here through the Caribbean. And we can zoom into a particular place like some of the places that we're going to hear more about later, like Philadelphia, and thinking about all of the lights that are on there in Philadelphia. In this case, the lighter yellow is more lights. And as you go to the orange or the darker red, that's fewer lights. And so now I'll go back. And the last resource that I want to talk about are some location connections maps. So these maps are built off of banding data, and the banding data is curated and recorded by the United States Geological Service bird banding lab. So they keep careful records of all of those bands. Researchers use those bands. They're a small metal band that goes onto the leg of the bird that's numbered. And so those birds, they're used for a number of different studies. And then if those birds are re-encountered someplace else, that information is submitted to the bird banding lab and provides us with some idea of where those birds moved in between those two times they were found. So we've worked with the bird banding lab to put all of those onto a map for different locations. So in this case, before I showed you a single species, now we're looking at band re-encounters for all species and birds that have either been tagged someplace and moved to Philadelphia or tagged in Philadelphia and moved someplace else. And what you can see is that birds go from Philadelphia all throughout the hemisphere, right? And they go there because they're migrating there. They also make those movements because they're dispersing. And what this demonstrates so clearly is that the actions we take in Philadelphia or any other lights out city, those actions are impacting bird populations across the hemisphere. And they're making a difference from Alaska and the boreal forest down into Central America and the Caribbean, and they're having that conservation impact across the entire footprint of migratory birds. So in the online toolkit, there's locations maps for 10 cities, and you can look up the one that's closest to you and have a look at those. And so finally, these have all been a set of maps that represent some larger work that we're doing on the Bird Migration Explorer with a number of different bird scientists and conservation partners. We'll be putting together this website and launching it this fall, and we look forward to telling you more about that as it becomes available. Finally, I'd like to thank everybody, especially the Migratory Bird Initiative team. That team has been working really hard to take the data that's available and make them into the maps like I showed you tonight. And a lot of thought goes into how can we present those in a way that makes them interesting to look at and understandable to everybody. So thank you very much. And I hope I have a little bit of time for questions.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Nat. That was great. I did drop those links in so people can explore some of the resources that Nat was talking about. I see a couple questions have come up specifically about climate change, how climate change is affecting, or is it affecting the roots or anything like that? Anything that you could share with us about that, Nat? Yeah,
so climate change is definitely something that it's a huge concern for migratory birds. And one of the things that is so important about, the whole reason to migrate is to arrive at your breeding grounds when the resources are available to you. And in order to do that, you have to be able to come up with your resources along the way as you move north. And so one of the big risks with migration and climate change is that those resources and the timing of migration are going to become mismatched, especially because birds have to depart their places where they spend the non-breeding season, our winter, before they know what the conditions are like on their breeding grounds. And so understanding that mismatch is a big area of study, and that's something that people are very concerned about in terms of climate change and bird migration.
Great, thanks. There's actually a lot of questions, and I'm also seeing we're approaching the bottom of the hour, and I'm sensitive the amount of time. But one quick question, what do we know about altitudes at which birds migrate?
Yeah, altitudes, it's highly variable. And so, again, a lot of them are going up some birds will go up to relatively high elevations. There's cooler temperatures. There's a number of different benefits and advantages of going to higher elevations. As you said before, a lot of raptors may be using thermals, or you can go out to the East Coast and watch peregrines move right down the beach where they're slope soaring, right? And it's one of the things that's so amazing about bird migration is that there's not just one solution. There's a whole diversity of solutions that birds have developed to get from one end of the hemisphere to the other. That's simply fantastic.
Yeah, it is really an incredible phenomenon, isn't it? Okay, well, thanks so much, Nat. There are more questions, and I think in the interest of time, we need to move on. I should also mention, because there have been a few questions, we are recording this webinar, and we will be circulating the recording with the resources we mentioned to everyone who's registered. So if you have to step away, you will be getting it in the future. Okay, thanks so much, Nat. I really appreciate that. Now, I'd like to introduce Tomás Altamirano. He is, and I'm going to say this in English, the coordinator of the National Bird Conservation Strategy in the Ministry of the Environment in Chile. Welcome, Tomás, and take it away.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Connie. I'll share my screen. Well, now we're gonna fly south a little bit. I will, is it, can you see it properly? I cannot see anything now.
And we don't see it in slide view.
There
We see it.
There we go.
There you go.
Well, good evening, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me as a member of the Audubon Americas team. I really appreciate the opportunity to tell you about our work on bird conservation in the southern flyways, and specifically the Pacific flyways. My name is Tomás Altamirano, and I'm the coordinator of both the elaboration and the implementation of the bird conservation plan for Chile, where also I would like to say that Audubon America has played a key role facilitating and supporting this process. Today, I'll tell you about the bird conservation plan for Chile, and I'll go deeper on one of the most important threats to birds in Chile, light pollution. What is this plan? This plan is a platform for collaboration on bird conservation. From March 2020, the Ministry of the Environment led this partnership platform with other public services, NGOs, national and international, and research centers and universities as well. We follow the open standards for conservation method. Together with all these entities, we assessed and qualified threats to birds in Chile in order to comprehensively understand the national situation of birds for Chile. After the whole process, we agreed in almost 60 actions to be implemented in the next 10 years, setting a roadmap to mitigate or eradicate, in the best of the cases, threats to birds in the country. Thus, light pollution has been established as one of the main threats and also challenges, especially for migratory seabirds. We conducted a number of workshops, webinars, surveys, and dialogues along the whole country, including a public comment period of 1 month, where we received and addressed almost 100 of comments. All of this was translated into more than 2,200 people from both public and private sectors, engaging them in the elaboration of this plan, but also, and more importantly, thinking in the implementation of this one. This plan was officially signed by the Chilean state on January 20th this year. But what does it mean? What does it mean to have this bird conservation plan in Chile? As I said, this plan was signed as a resolution by the Ministry of the Environment, and thus it is now officially integrated into the policy frame of the Chilean state. This plan is very different from other bird strategies or plan of the region, not only because it was built with a great number of people, but also it was led and officialized by the state of Chile. This is the first bird conservation plan at national scale with these attributes in the whole region, which can be replicated in other countries of the region. All these attributes are remarkably important because policy is a strong conservation driver, but it also sets an important challenge: work for a successful implementation of this plan, being able to get funding to implement actions that will need it. This is one of the main challenges at the moment in conservation planning, I would say, especially in Latin America. In summary, we do have a roadmap to work on, which is integrated in the policy frame and agreed with several entities and citizens. But why is important to work in light pollution in Chile? Why are we talking about it now? Chile plays a crucial role in the flyways. Half of the birds that breed in the States and Canada spend more than 50% of their lives in Latin America and the Caribbean. Here you can see Chile comprises almost the whole south temperate region of the Pacific flyways, here in yellow. And thus, for example, the Hasonian godwits breeding in Alaska fly the whole way to the southern corner of the continent to spend the northern winter in Chile. Like this species, there are almost 40 bird species that travel from the US or Canada into the Chilean coastal or seas. So how are we receiving these species? What are these species seeing when they arrive here? We have done an amazing job protecting the skies from light pollution for astronomical purposes, but paradoxically, in these regions of Chile, we have recorded the greater avian fallout and mortality due to light pollution, unfortunately. We have to take care about our sky, but also about our home, our biodiversity. Unfortunately, this phenomenon has increased during the last decades, from few dozens to thousands of individuals impacted per year. And this may be because the expansion of the illuminated areas, but also the type of technology used, such as LED with an important blue spectral component. In the world, there are records of light impacts on more than 60 birds species, and Chile is not the exception. Today, we have records of at least 17 bird species affected by light, mainly seabirds that breed in the region. And here I'm showing 8 species. I'm not going to go deep in all of them, but 3 of them. For example, the pink-footed shearwater, which spend summertime in North America, as far north as southern Alaska. Perhaps there is someone from Alaska in the audience. They are flying towards you now, but they only breed in Chile, and specifically in 2 places in Chile, in Mocha Island, which is a small island in south central Chile, and Juan Fernandez Archipelago, where they are importantly impacted by light pollution. Other example is the Peruvian diving petrel, which this year, unfortunately, we reached a record of 340 individuals were found impacted by light. Fortunately, some of those individuals were able to be recovered and released back into their natural habitats. And finally, the last example that I would like to give is the Marham storm petrel, which only in the city of Arica, which is a city, the northernmost city in Chile, in the breeding season of 2019 and 20, there were more than 3,000 individuals fell out by light pollution. These dramatic numbers are demanding actions. We have set the policy frame in the bird conservation plan, and there are many different NGOs working together with the Chilean state at the moment. And so to summarize this presentation, we have mainstream birds into development agendas with the bird conservation plan, setting a policy frame on bird conservation and light pollution that need to be implemented. But there is a gap to successfully implement such a plan. We need to establish funding mechanisms for its implementation, together with articulate key stakeholders in different territories to fill this gap. Also, and very importantly, I would like to highlight that birds are inviting us to work as a team, nationally and internationally, working on bird conservation through the whole flyways. For example, in few weeks, there will be a new light norm in Chile, which will take in account the light impact on birds, specifically light placed near to the breeding territories. Breeding territories of species that fly back and forward to the northern hemisphere. We have a unique opportunity here to fill the implementation gap, gathering resources and call the attention of different people and key stakeholders in order to respond quick enough to keep these bird populations healthy and our development sustainable. Thanks for your attention, and I hope you have enjoyed this story, and I'll be happy to take some questions.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Tomas. That was fascinating. And, you know, it reminded, I thought about using this phrasing, but many of the birds that we see in North America are actually, we're only borrowing them from Latin America, right? Because they're spending so much more time down there. And so I just have to mention that. Let me see if there's questions from, and I should give a shout out to our friends on Facebook who are not on the Zoom. So of course we're welcoming you. But let me check and see if there's questions from that crowd or from our Zoom crowd. Let's see. One quick question is, I'm just going to read it, but is temperature or light or something else the biggest? How is the Chilean culture open for ways to help limit nighttime light pollution? I think that's kind of one of the questions I had, right? Is that there seems like there's been so much, even if there's an implementation gap, as you mentioned, that there's so much regulation and regulatory emphasis on that.
Yeah.
How has the Chilean culture lent to that? Because that is not, that we have not gotten that far, I would say, in the United States.
Yeah, well, the new norm will establish like another standard, and they will take in account, in the paper at least, the breeding colonies and birds that are highly threatened, as the ones that I mentioned. I would say there is a huge gap between that and the implementation. I don't know. I'm not sure if the question is referring to the culture, like as a country, like normal people. I would say this is one thing that the people that in the South, for example, are the ones that cannot see the impact. They will probably not be aware of that. But there's room to work right now. There's a special opportunity and unique opportunity right now, and we need to take advantage of that.
Yes, thank you. And then one other quick question, which I think you talked about. I mean, you mentioned that there's just a number of stakeholders that were involved. Any important stakeholders that you wanted to particularly highlight?
Yeah, there are several NGOs working on it, especially Oikonos, ROC, which is the Red de Observadores de Vida Silvestre y Aves, Pantalasa, and the Ministry of the Environment. They are pushing very hard in different plans, official plans to work on it. So yeah, I would like to highlight those.
Great, thanks. I think in the interest of time, I'm sorry, because we have questions coming in, and we could probably do a whole nother webinar, and maybe I'll call on you again, Tomas. We can join up and do this again. I would love that.
Sure.
But thank you so much for joining, and thank you for all the amazing work that you're doing in Chile.
Thank you.
Okay. So before I pass it to Connie for the panel, I just wanted to mention that, and speaking to more the US audience, from a legislative perspective, I thought it would be useful to mention this. So we are excited to note that we're expecting new legislation to be introduced as soon as this week, and that's led by Senators Cardin and Portman. So it's a bipartisan approach that would more than triple the available funding for a program dedicated to birds that migrate across the Western Hemisphere. And this program is called the Neotropical Migratory Bird Conservation Act, which provides critical funding for bird conservation projects for the hundreds of bird species that depend on Latin America and the Caribbean for wintering and stopover habitat. So look out for more information. Again, we expect that to be introduced this week in the US Congress. So there'll be opportunities for you to learn more about that and take action. I did just want to also quickly highlight the Migratory Bird Protection Act, which will help secure the law that protects nearly all of our birds, which is the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. Protecting birds from a variety of hazards they face, including oil waste pits, oil spills, power lines, etc. The law has been under attack in recent years, and this legislation will help safeguard it for the future. And I think that we're going to drop in the chat an action alert if you want to support that. Finally, I'll just mention one additional one, which is the Federal Bird Safe Buildings Act. And that has been introduced in the current US Congress and in previous Congresses as well. This would promote bird-friendly materials and design features, including lighting at federal buildings. And you can sign on to support that legislation as well. So I did just want to mention those. There's been a number of folks that have mentioned in the chat about legislation, about how do we achieve measurable outcomes around this. And I think that that's a really great segue into the panel, who is dealing with a lot of these issues at the local levels. And so with this, I'm going to pass it back to Connie.
Great, thanks, John. All right, we've got a great discussion lined up for you. We've got Heidi Hoven, who's Assistant Manager of Audubon's Gilmore Sanctuary, as well as co-chair of the Lighting Ordinance Committee of the Utah IDA chapter, and she is part of the Audubon Rockies team. We've got Lee Altadonna, who is president of Wingcoat Audubon Society, as well as coordinator of the Bird Safe Philly collaborative team. And then we've got Paulina Jones and Danielle DeBella-Lenaway from the Coalition for Bird Friendly Asheville. So thanks for joining us. It's great to have you all here. So first off, I'd like to start with Danielle and Paulina. Can you tell us a little bit about the coalition and your work focused on light pollution and reducing collisions? And really what sparked that, either personally or for your organizations?
Great question. Danielle, do you want me to kind of frame this with my undergraduate research and how that brought us all together?
Sure.
So, hi everyone, I'm Paulina Jones. During the fall or the 2020-2021 academic year at UNCA, I was completing my undergraduate research project, which was looking at fatal bird window collisions on the UNC Asheville campus. And the results of my research were kind of depressing. Like there were a lot of birds that were fatally colliding with windows. And, you know, through that and our UNCA Audubon chapter in partnership with the Blue Ridge Audubon chapter, which Danielle is a board member of, Danielle, myself, and the president or former president of UNCA Audubon, we all kind of came together and started having this conversation about like bird mortality in Asheville and like what we could do about it. And, you know, it kind of seemed like it was a big ask for the city to try to convince the city and businesses to treat all of their windows. We decided instead that maybe addressing lights and light pollution within the city could be a good first step in that direction. And through that, we formed some partnerships. And so I'll pass that off to Danielle.
Sure, you want me to go forward here, Paulina? Asheville is listed in the top 125 cities with over 150 species that produces migration disrupting light pollution. The city of Asheville signed a proclamation with us, the Coalition for Bird Friendly Asheville, UNC Audubon, Blue Ridge Audubon, and with the support of our partners, where the city will turn off their lights on all city buildings during migration periods, which is encouraging commercial building owners, operators, tenants to voluntarily switch off unnecessary lights, basically by utilizing the city communication channels to raise awareness of our coalition.
Great, thanks, Paulina and Danielle. I'm going to turn to Lee. Lee,
Yes.
in Philadelphia, can you tell us about kind of what was the catalyst that sparked the Bird Safe Philly effort, and what has your group been doing about light pollution and collisions?
Very good. Yeah, thanks, Connie. one of the things that really sparked the current effort in Philadelphia and Bird Safe Philly was a massive and catastrophic bird kill on October 2nd, 2020. It happened to be, the city was fully lit. It was a low ceiling, bad weather, but there's an estimated 1,500 birds that were killed in one night. It captured the attention of the media, especially the Philadelphia Inquirer. And what it did spark is the bird people, the bird organizations that cover Philadelphia to get together. It included the Academy of Natural Sciences, included Audubon. Connie happened to be a Philadelphia area resident and involved. The Delaware Valley Ornithological Club, one of the oldest bird clubs in the country. And then Valley Forge and Wingcoat Audubons. We both have portions of Philadelphia in our chapter territories. And we put leadership together from those teams. And we really discussed, what are we going to do about this? So we formed Bird Safe Philly. Person associated with the Academy of Natural Sciences wrote an op-ed in the Philadelphia Inquirer to really urge that there'd be a lights out initiative in the city. And that was followed by the first of our teams that we organized Bird Safe Philly around. We call it the Lights Out team. It was really chaired by folks from the Academy of Natural Sciences, included some folks like me and Connie and others from the city of Philadelphia. And particularly important were representatives from BOMA and BIA, that's the Building Owners Management Association and the Building Industry Association, very important partners in retrospect. It also involves some media support from National Audubon, Chandler Lemon and others that were very involved. But what resulted in this op-ed was and from the Lights Out team was really early adopters in some of the major buildings. If you know Philadelphia at all, or you've watched any sporting events when they show the city at night, we have a pretty prominent section of the city with high-rise, very tall buildings. Much of the city is low-rise, more like row homes and that kind of thing, but a very prominent skyline, and it's dominated by buildings like Comcast. Comcast has two major buildings. Comcast became the first two buildings that said they were going to participate in Lights Out. They were early adopters. And between our friends at BOMA and BIA, a whole bunch of other buildings came on board. We got significant input. I believe we had 41 commercial buildings that came on board in 2021 for both the spring and fall migration. 53 residential buildings, and talk a little bit more about that if we need to, if you have more questions. And we had 6 municipal buildings. We also had some buildings in the suburbs. Bird Safe Philly doesn't just focus on the city of Philadelphia. We are looking to engage the surrounding counties in both New Jersey and in suburban Philadelphia to participate as well, because we also know it's not just skyscrapers that we need to talk about. We need to talk about low-rise buildings as well. But that's what got us started. We have a monitoring team, the Lights Out team. We have a team associated with education and advocacy. And we also have a team that looks at what we call informal or community monitoring using iNaturalist that we want to develop further. We're looking for the long haul. Lights Out is, as we see it, the tip of the iceberg to get folks to understand the impact of light, and World Migratory Bird Day is certainly a great help in this. But we also look to broaden the education aspect to I guess the idea that glass causes and low-rise buildings cause a huge number of bird kills each year as well. So that's part of our overall program. I hope that answers your question, Connie. And if there are other questions in the chat, we'll do our best to answer them.
Great, thanks, Lee. And we'll come back to hear more about Philly efforts in just a little bit. I want to turn to Heidi. Heidi, you're part of our Audubon Rockies team, and that includes Colorado, Wyoming, as well as Utah. And I know that there are There's Lights Out Colorado effort, as well as Lights Out Denver. But can you share a bit about the Utah effort and talk a bit about what that has involved and what sparked action on that front?
Sure, happy to. The Lights Out program that was sparked by Tracy Aviary, initially in Salt Lake City, was really focused around a bird collision community science effort that was linking the effects of reflective light at night and lights within buildings towards many bird collisions, and a drive to, on a voluntary basis, to involve the community to come get signage to put in their yards, and to voluntarily turn out their lights at night during the peak migration periods from May through June, and then again in September and October. And of course, any months on those shoulders of that would be great too, or if not year round. But from 11 p.m. to 6 a.m., people are asked to turn out their lights. And so I just want to add that my involvement through Audubon closely connects with Tracy Aviary's actions, because I help manage a bird sanctuary, which is nearly 4,000 acres on the shores of Great Salt Lake. And it is a huge stopover for millions of birds each migratory period, and then through the summer breeding months. And with the encroaching development toward the lake, there's been a lot of attention focused on light pollution and the effects of light on birds. And so we've partnered with Tracy Aviary to help them escalate their event, and we can talk about that more later, but that's one area of partnering.
Great, thanks, Heidi. So I know that we've, sorry, I think there was an echo. So I know we've gotten some questions about Lights Out. So let me just step back a little bit, and I'm going to offer this to any of you to talk about the Lights Out program and what that actually entails. I know, Heidi, you touched on it a little bit, but it's a bit different across different cities. So Danielle and Paulina, for your team, how is Lights Out implemented?
So we rely on like almost kind of like a grassroots advocacy strategy, where we're interacting with individuals, going to businesses, and offering little decals in exchange for them to make a pledge to reduce their lights during the migratory seasons. And it's been really helpful having this proclamation in hand, because signed by our mayor of Asheville, because it kind of gives us a little bit of muscle, like, hey, this is something the city is doing. So we would like to, it would be great if y'all would participate in this as well. But also, we focused a lot of our efforts initially for like the first year we were working on this with collaborating with the city before we even began doing the community outreach and business outreach portion of this program. So whereas some Lights Out programs, work more so on like the boots on the ground outreach, getting the community to support it, and then approaching the city, we were really fortunate to have an in with the mayor and a couple of individuals who are on the sustainability advisory committee for the city of Asheville. And just using those connections really helped us be able to get that proclamation passed, so we could start, the boots on the ground kind of work.
The one thing I could say about working with the city on these type of these kind of plans is you have to present it. You have to present it in a couple of different methods. And for us, the thing that seemed to work is the energy savings that the city was going to gain from this. It was one thing for us as being birders and true Audubon hard people to save the birds. Once you say we're going to, save you kind of 5 months of energy, knowing exactly what they were spending per month, that kind of was a big reinforcement for them. And with that, then they were very apt to help us, basically. So that was a big thing. Also, the forming community outreach programs, addressing problem windows, taking advantage of low-cost window treatments, the reflectivity, things like that, changing the LED lights throughout the city. A lot of those things came into place kind of quickly for us. There seemed to be that interest. But for us, our next big step is working with privately owned buildings and managers. And that's going to be kind of a tougher agenda.
Great, thanks, Danielle and Paulina. So in terms of lights out, what have you all been encouraging in terms of times and time of year or dates? Turning off lights. What particular dates?
You're talking about us?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. We're right in the middle of it, of course. So we're doing 11 till 6, well, 11:30 till 6 is what the city has agreed to. And Paulina actually has gone down. This is my scientist. So she goes downtown and she's gone through the buildings to see who has and who hasn't. And they seem to been pretty good about addressing that. They've put on timers. They've done, shades. They're doing things. They're trying to apply things. Since COVID has happened, there's been a lot of loss of jobs and they're having troubles with hiring and so on and so forth. So a lot of things as well as funding got cut. So we're kind of battling against that a little bit. But we're just in the same migration periods, the 2 periods of fall and spring. And
yeah. And we pushed really hard to make sure that, like, as far as the months go, we wanted to kind of cast a broad net. So it's, at least for the City of Asheville proclamation, it's March through May. So beginning of March through the end of May. And then September through the end of November. So beginning of September through the end of November. Because while, peak migration kind of happens April and October, where we're at, and that varies, be it the spring migration or the fall migration. We just really wanted to try to encapsulate as much of that migratory activity as possible. And, ideally down the line, if we can get this to be a year-round practice that both the city and our business owners and residents are, participating in, then that kind of captures those off-season migrations, like your raptor migrations and such. So start with the big ones and then hopefully cast a broad enough net to cover everybody in the long run.
Great, thanks. So, and Lee, I know in Philadelphia that the times are a little different in terms of the seasons that we're focused on, and the dates that we're focused on it, as well as those hours too. So,
Right, I can share that what we have adopted was in 2021 that the spring migration would be kicked off on April 1st for lights out and continue through May 31st. We're, of course, in the midst of spring migration now. And then the fall migration is from August 15th to November 15th. And we ask for, it's voluntary, but we ask for lights to be turned off from midnight to 6 a.m. And of course, depending on the time of year, it's already light outside here in Philly, beginning about 5:30. Sunrise is about 5:50 right now, but it's still a pretty good handle for the time to be considered. And we've gotten some, very good, I guess, compliance, voluntary compliance with the buildings that are participating, including some photography and so on. And it also attracted, you may be asking this later, Connie, but I know it's attracted a great deal of media attention. The success we've had here in Philadelphia has been promoted. One of the other key features was city government. City council adopted a proclamation in support of Lights Out and Bird Safe Philly. So that was particularly influential as well as the support we got from BOMA and from BIA. And if I can just quickly mention the residential buildings that we talked about, what was compelling is that the residents of some of these residential buildings, high-rise buildings, pretty posh, condominiums and apartments, started putting notices in the elevators about drawing your shades at night, doing other kinds of things to reduce the amount of light. Obviously, residents in these high rises Residential high rises are not going to walk around in the dark. They need light to do their evening activities. So that's really been, I guess, gratifying to see that kind of support from residents of these residential buildings. Not 100% of buildings are involved yet. That's one of our goals ahead, is to get more buildings involved and to get, again, more buildings involved in the surrounding suburban communities as well.
Thanks, Lee. We've been getting some questions in the chat about safety. So how do you convince people to turn off their lights when they're concerned about safety? Who wants to take that?
I could speak to that a little bit. So there's an organization, I'm just looking it up quickly so that I get it right. It's called National Institute of Crime Prevention. And they are promoting a program called Crime Prevention Through Environmental Design. And just in a nutshell, it's an educational outreach to show people that there's ways that you can meet both objectives of safety with lighting and then meeting these environmental concerns around wildlife and particularly birds. And it has to do with what lighting fixtures they're using and making sure that the lights are aimed downwards and shielded so that they're not showing up bright, up lighting into the sky and creating sky glow or glare. And it's actually less safe with really glaring bright lights because all of you have experienced that discomfort you get when you look at very, very bright glaring lights. And you can actually see better when that glare is covered and just shining on the areas that you need to see, like where your footing is and showing downward. And the idea is that even police officers are able to see in the nighttime better with this kind of lighting. They can see perpetrators, folks trying to do bad things. And it also doesn't shine on the police cars and show them up as well to give themselves away. So it's just an interesting program to think about that intersection of providing the kind of lighting that we need to feel safe in our own environment and landscape while not impacting the migrating birds quite so much.
Thanks, Heidi.
Connie, if I can weigh in, I can
Sure.
indicate that because this is voluntary, the question of security falls to the individual building in a major way. And that, I know we encourage using motion detection lights rather than something that's on all the time. I know that the IDA website offers a lot of counsel through their website on issues related to security. I know that Connie and I worked with the city of Harrisburg, which is not that far from Philadelphia, and security does remain an issue that they have to address themselves. That's on a building by building basis in some ways. And it's also an area where education along the lines that Heidi shared is something that's going to be important down the road. But I think that helps to address it when it's voluntary and we're talking about, lighted sidewalks or some other kinds of things with lights that are put into place that observe ordinances that are downward only and not the kind of bleed into the general.
Lee, you got muted.
Yeah, I did. That was me. I'm sorry. It was really important what I said, but I won't repeat it.
Also there's something to think about, shielding lighting for roadways and parking lots, resident businesses and landscapes. If you're shielding it downward, it's increasing our visibility and decreasing distractions such as glare. So if there is a little more direction put in just even the downward lighting and the quality of the light is going to make a substantial difference.
Great, thanks. And I know we're getting a lot of questions about LEDs. So Let's talk about that a little bit. Heidi, do you want to start?
Yes, this is a huge pet peeve of mine. So LEDs are great. They are energy savings. They help reduce the carbon footprint. But the problem is that when you look at the whole light spectrum that's included in the LED, they include a lot of brightness from the UV, the blue range of the light waves, which are very damaging and to humans and wildlife, and cause a lot of, contribute to a lot of the problems of light pollution in general. And so now there are technologies that are available that are shifting that spectrum of light, that range of light waves towards a warmer color. And so if you're buying lighting fixtures, and IDA has a lot of great information on this with links to businesses that provide dark sky friendly lighting, which is equivalent to bird friendly lighting. It's warmer, they're warmer colors. They still provide the amount of light that you need. And they also talk about a thing called color temperature, which is measured in kelvins, and you want to try to get less than 3000 kelvins. So that combined with, warmer colors and temperatures, you can improve the quality of the light and reduce the light pollution that we're trying to take care of. And the other thing is lighting technology with smart technology, where you can have dimming, you can time it, you can have all these controls for billboards or even in your home. So LEDs really offer, they're the doorway, but we're not there yet, and we really need to educate people about how they should, we should shift away from the really, really bright blue light that's often used.
Thanks, Heidi. Danielle, did you want to add to that?
I'm just nodding along because I'm in agreement with Heidi. There always seems to be a controversy among that, but it's completely true. It's about 3000 or so, and the warmer light is going to make a significant difference. Absolutely.
Great, thanks.
Connie, if I can add, I know that Keith Russell, one of our colleagues, who's the program manager for urban conservation with Audubon here in Philadelphia and Audubon Mid-Atlantic, has been recommending that blue and green light has, not necessarily for security, but in terms of if lights are on, if it's in the blue and green spectrum, it's less attractive to birds than white light. And that's based on an experiment that he had been involved with in 2012. We had in Philadelphia a group come in called the Open Air Light Show. That if you've ever watched Rocky, that's the Ben Franklin Parkway. They put spotlights all over the parkway, and it was intended for if people read a poem or they sang a song, the lights would dance around in the sky. And a lot of us that were involved with DVOC and with Wingcoat Audubon and others were there to monitor what was happening with the birds. We also had radar at the Strawberry Mansion, where the East Park Reservoir, and now the Discovery Center and Audubon Center in partnership with Outward Bound is located. But what we did, and what Keith was able to do, was after this program was finished, they used different lenses on the spotlights, and they used white light, they used blue light, they used other colors as well. And what they found was that with the blue and green light, there was a 75% reduction in the birds being attracted to the light beams. So that you often hear Keith, I know Connie's been a part of a conversation with some of the buildings that have a special kind of lighting that they're reluctant to turn off, that if they can go to the blue and green spectrum, it reduces the attraction to the birds. And again, that's based on the data we got from this experiment that Keith Russell really led back in 2012.
Great, thanks, Lee. Well, I know that we are running out of time, and we did plan a lot more questions, and we've got a lot of questions in the chat, but I wanted to ask you all if you have any lessons learned or wanted to share anything for our broader audience in terms of what you've experienced in terms of challenges or lessons learned, however you want to approach that. So Heidi, why don't you go ahead first?
I guess the biggest lesson for me is just to go ahead and dive in. I really only became aware of this issue in 2016 and just jumped in with both feet and became involved with the IDA chapter. And from there, it's just expanded. And I was told in the beginning, you know, good luck. But it is really gaining momentum in the Salt Lake City area, the whole valley. We are just about to kick off a commission for darker skies in Salt Lake Valley, partnering with the Salt Lake City Mayor's administration first, and then growing it out to other communities to spread the word. And, you know, there's so many great tools out there, and people just, you know, I didn't know really how to use an ordinance and how important they can be, but here I am co-chairing the Lighting Ordinance Committee on the board of the IDA chapter, and it's just incredible. You just volunteer, just get involved, and you learn, and you pick up these tools. There's great websites, Bird Friendly's community website with Audubon, Rocky's Audubon. John, there's a link I sent to you for that. Rocky's Audubon also has great info, and then IDA website too. Just a plethora of information and training skills, tools for you to dive in on. So I would just say, big lesson, don't be afraid, dive in, go for what grabs your passion, and surprise yourself.
Great, thanks, Heidi. Paulina and Danielle, how about you all?
It's a marathon getting these programs underway. It's definitely not a sprint. So for those who are, you know, interested in trying to get this conversation started about light pollution in your own communities, like, you know, as you go through it, sometimes it can seem like it's taken a while and things just aren't going up, but like your work and persistence will be rewarded. So, you know, just keep at it. Like I said, it took us like a year to get our proclamation on the table, and, you know, lots of meetings and all of that. So like, it's worth it to go through all of the seemingly endless, small, tedious tasks of creating these partnerships and everything to come out on the other side with like a program that is supported by your city and your community. So like, it's a marathon. Find your pace and stick to it. You know, don't burn yourself out wanting to turn off all the lights immediately. Unless that, you know, you have a mass collision event, like what would happen in Philadelphia, that could really catalyze these things to move through faster. But like, if you're just starting out, you know, take your time, find your key players and partners, and, you know, just stay at it.
We'll be glad to share any information for people who want to develop this idea and the process that we went through. We had a lot of support from UNCA, the students there, as well as I even have a fellowship, a scholarship person who's working with us. So there's a lot of ways of tying the community in at different levels with this, but we'll be more than happy to share any information that anybody needs.
Great, thanks, Paulina and Danielle. You know, it sounds like partnerships are really critical to everything, and that's what we're hearing. Lee, how about you?
I think it's really building for the long haul. I think Paulina talked about a marathon. That's exactly right. We're an all volunteer effort, and getting more people involved, more people aware, and getting a broader net for our monitors and others to stay involved is going to be critical. We also have the challenge of trying to bring on board buildings that have not participated yet. And then again, as I said, lights out is kind of the tip of the iceberg. It's then to begin to work with property owners, homeowners, schools, businesses that are 4 stories or less, where we also then deal with glass and birds collision with glass, as this awareness about lights and birds, bird mortality due to light is expanding into some other areas where we can have an impact. And then finally, it's then working with legislation, ordinances at the municipal level, state legislatures and federal programs that John highlighted, earlier in the program. I think they're going to be critical as well.
Great, thanks, Lee. I think we have, I'm checking our time to see if we have time for one more quick question with regards to, let's see. Can we briefly talk about how effective has it been? So, and I think you can define effective in a number of ways. So if you all just want to briefly touch on that, I know we don't have a whole lot of time, but I want to sort of do another quick round just to give just a final overview of effectiveness and whether engagement or kind of from a collision standpoint or light pollution standpoint. So Paulina and Danielle, do you want to start?
Sure thing. So I think, major success was, again, getting that proclamation passed. I think that was a good signaling of the effectiveness of this program, as far as just like having the city support. But now as we're in this implementation process, there is a noticeable reduction in the light pollution that we're seeing on the skyline. So that's pretty nice. But as far as like getting everybody to sign on, just it takes a lot of man hours. So we're still working on, building up our pledge form or pledgees, I suppose, who are committed to this program. And yeah, I mean, I'll be excited to see, once we get to the end of the fall migration, we're kind of like figuring it out for this spring. And then I feel like once we hit the fall, we'll have more parameters to see the success of this program. And, hopefully we'll have some cool technology to kind of help us measure that light pollution as well that we'll be able to use.
And to Lee's point, we also are trying to get Asheville to have agree to new construction and architects and trying to have bird safe glass. And so we're trying to bring this also into another level, not just with lights out, but as he mentioned, 4 stories down and window strikes. So I think with a combination of lots of things, this is just going to be an ever growing just event. So we're pretty excited and we're happy that it's moving forward.
Great. Thanks, Danielle and Paulina. Lee, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, just very quickly, we have a team of volunteer monitors that go out 5:30 a.m. every morning until 8, and they are collecting birds, each morning in certain sections of the city, and also at Independence National Historical Park. They're not at Independence Hall. They're in the new buildings like the Constitution Center, the Liberty Bell Center, and looking at bird kills on those particular efforts, those particular buildings, and maintaining data. And I think through Connie, we've also gotten some support from, is it KPG Corporation? If I have the right initials, you can correct me if I'm wrong. But they are helping us crunch data in terms of looking at correlations with different types of weather or, weather conditions or other sorts of things, so we can begin to analyze the data more deeply that our monitors get. We have not had another massive bird kill, but I think our partners in Lights Out understand that most of our data is not longitudinal. It's anecdotal at this point at best, but at least, we can document that there seems to be some benefit from Lights Out, and hopefully we can build the case with data from the monitors as well, and we can go from there.
Thanks, Lee. Heidi.
Yeah, thanks. So I would say, you know that you're getting people's attention by just following their interest in suggesting some of the tools that are out there. One that I'm not sure that we've mentioned tonight is the Birdcast data set. And it's so funny. If you just Google Birdcast, you can see the migration peak period. It tells you how many millions are passing through your area, or whatever it is, and it just helps stimulate this, volunteer wanting to churn out your lights. And I would also say that we know we're being effective by seeing some of these local city ordinances, hearing us and wanting to upgrade, asking for examples. And so our IDA chapter we're putting together a library that we'll put on our website there for them to, have examples of ordinances. We were looked upon to help bring in the wildlife aspect of their lighting policy in one of Park City's recent upgrades in their lighting ordinance at Snyderville Basin. And then finally, at the planning level, even just tonight, the Salt Lake County's West General Plan was passed, and it was so cool because it included all these really great guidances that went into much more detail about how to improve dark sky friendly policy, much more than you might see in other things. It wasn't just a broad sweeping brush over it. And it specifically pointed out for the protection of the migratory birds that are coming through to the Great Salt Lake shoreline area. So it's, you never know what these partnerships are going to lead to. And just by staying involved and just speaking up just a little bit, and just that education piece carries a long way.
Great. Thanks, Heidi. It's a great way to close us out. I wanted to thank you all for being here tonight for this discussion. You all are doing some great work on the ground, and we thank you. So we, to our audience out there, will be sharing resources that we touched on today. And as John mentioned, the recording will be shared as well. I'm going to turn things back over to John to close us out now.
All right. Thank you, Connie. And first of all, I really just want to thank Connie for her amazing work tonight. Thanks to Nat and Tomas for their fantastic presentations, and of course to Lee, Danielle, Paulina, and Heidi for really sharing their tremendous expertise in the work that they've done on the ground. It's I think that it's difficult, even in this hour and a half that we've spent together almost, to actually cover all the issues, all of the solutions, all the ways that we are working together. But hopefully we've given everyone at least some perspective, and wherever they sit on their knowledge base on this issue, a little more information, connection points to how they may actually be able to contribute to solutions in their community. That's obviously something that we want to do. As Connie has mentioned, and I just want to reinforce that we'll be following up to all people that registered for this webinar with the recording and also the resources that were shared. And we certainly want you to connect with us if you have any questions. This is a global effort around World Migratory Bird Day, and with our partners in Audubon Americas, we are working hard across the Western Hemisphere to protect birds, and in every way that means, including in the context of the artificial light at night and light pollution, in keeping with the theme of World Migratory Bird Day 2022. So thank you all for joining us, and get out there, enjoy the night sky, turn some lights out, find some birds, and also find your peace. Okay, thanks so much, and have a great evening.